Do not go on that trip. Ask your daughter about the man in the red car. That was the message. No name, no return number, no explanation. Just those words. I stood in the middle of my kitchen, phone in hand, reading them over and over again as if repetition might unlock some hidden clarity. But all I felt was a tightening in my chest, a quiet unease beginning to rise in my throat. It was a quiet Tuesday morning, and I had been packing snacks for our weekend trip. The living room was filled with half-zipped duffel bags, a cooler sat by the back door, and a checklist hung on the fridge, with items dutifully crossed off in blue ink. It was supposed to be a peaceful getaway, just the three of us heading to the mountains for a few days to unwind and reconnect. There was no room in my plans for ominous texts from unknown numbers. I locked the phone screen and set it face down on the counter, trying to shake it off. Probably someone trying to scare me, I thought. A wrong number. A prank. A mistake. But something in the wording clung to me like smoke. Ask your daughter. The words looped in my head as I packed clothes into her small suitcase. She was 12, old enough to be independent but still young enough to hold my hand in public. She had been quieter than usual lately, spending more time in her room, less talkative at dinner. I had assumed it was just the beginning of that preteen phase, the start of mood swings and secrets. I had not pressed her about it. Maybe I should have. She came into the room just as I was folding her sweatshirt. Mom, have you seen my charger? She asked, not looking up from her phone. I told her it was in the drawer by the television. She nodded, left, and closed the door behind her. I stood there, holding that sweatshirt, the weight of it somehow heavier now. I looked out the window toward the street. A car passed by, a silver SUV, and I caught my own reflection in the glass. I looked tired. No, not tired. Uneasy. The message replayed in my mind again and again. I picked up my phone and stared at the message once more. I tapped the screen, trying to trace the number, but it was listed as unknown. No caller ID. No way to respond. I tried calling back, but the line went nowhere. I considered telling my husband, but something held me back. Maybe it was the way he always brushed off my worries with logic and rationality, even when I just needed him to listen. He would tell me it was probably spam or a scam. He would roll his eyes and say I watched too many thrillers on television. I could already hear his voice in my head, already see his amused smile. So I said nothing. I went back to packing. But I moved slower now, distracted, like something fragile had shifted in the air and I was afraid to breathe too hard. That night, as I loaded the car with some of our things, I glanced down the street. There was a red car parked 3 houses away. I did not recognize it. It was just sitting there, engine off, lights out, empty as far as I could tell. I stood there for a moment too long, squinting through the dusk. Then I shook my head and went back inside. Later, when I went to check on my daughter, she was already in bed. Her phone was under her pillow, and her bedside lamp was still on. She looked peaceful, her face soft in the glow, her breathing steady. I stood in the doorway, the message in my phone pressing like a weight in my pocket. Ask your daughter about the man in the red car. But I did not. I kissed her forehead and turned off the light. I walked back to my room, heart heavier than it had been that morning, though I still could not explain why. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself it was just one of those strange coincidences, a one-time thing that would fade by morning. I told myself a lot of things. But that night, I barely slept. The red car stayed in my dreams, always just at the edge of the frame, waiting, watching. The morning after I received the message, I woke up with a faint ache of unrest still clinging to me. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, casting narrow lines across the room, but nothing about the brightness could shake the heaviness that had settled in my chest. I moved through the routine motions, brushing my teeth, making coffee, preparing breakfast, but I was not fully present in any of it. I kept waiting for the feeling to fade, but it lingered, quiet and insistent. My daughter came into the kitchen while I was slicing fruit. She greeted me softly and went straight to the table, pulling her legs up beneath her as she scrolled through her phone. There was something about her posture that struck me as different. Closed off. Guarded. I watched her from the corner of my eye, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. I set her plate in front of her and sat across the table. She said thank you, barely above a whisper. I asked how she slept. She said fine. I asked if she was excited about the trip, and she shrugged. That shrug caught in my mind. She had been looking forward to this trip for weeks. We had spent evenings talking about all the places we would hike, the cabin we had rented, the books we would bring. A shrug did not match the excitement she had shown before. Are you feeling all right? I asked gently. She looked up briefly, then nodded. Just tired. I smiled, but it did not reach my eyes. I stirred my coffee, trying to collect my thoughts, to find the right way to ask more. But I could feel the distance between us stretching wider, and I did not want to push her further away. After breakfast, I sat on the edge of the couch, phone in hand, staring at the message once again. I considered calling someone. Maybe my sister. She always had a practical outlook on things. But when I started typing out the message, I deleted it halfway through. How could I explain something so strange without sounding paranoid? A single text message and a red car parked down the street hardly qualified as danger. Still, I could not shake the feeling that something was off. Later that day, I watched her from the kitchen window as she walked toward the mailbox. A red car passed slowly down the street, and I noticed her stiffen. Her shoulders drew up slightly, and she stopped moving for just a second. Then, as the car disappeared around the corner, she continued walking. The moment was small, barely noticeable. But I noticed it. I began to remember other moments from the past few months, things I had dismissed at the time. A time when we were walking through the parking lot, and she had suddenly grabbed my hand, eyes locked on a red vehicle 2 rows away. Or the time she had insisted on staying inside the school gates until I pulled the car all the way up to the curb. I had chalked those moments up to growing anxiety, part of adjusting to middle school and all the emotions that came with it. But now, seen through a new lens, they felt different. More intentional. More fearful. That evening, I decided to bring it up again. She was curled up on the couch with a blanket and a book, her phone lying beside her. I sat beside her and gently touched her shoulder. You have seemed a little distracted lately, I said, keeping my voice calm and steady. Is there anything you want to talk about? She did not answer immediately. Her eyes remained on the page, even though I could tell she was no longer reading. After a few moments, she shrugged again. I am fine. You know you can tell me anything, right? I asked, brushing a piece of hair behind her ear. If something is bothering you, I want to help. She nodded but still did not look at me. I waited a moment longer, hoping she might open up, but the silence between us grew. I told my husband that night, mentioned the message, the red car, and the way she had been acting. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, lacing up his shoes, getting ready to take the dog for a walk. That sounds like one of those spam texts, he said. People send all kinds of weird things nowadays. Probably just a scam. But it mentioned her specifically, I replied. And then there was that red car yesterday, and she… Honey, he interrupted gently, you are overthinking. She is 12. Kids get moody. They pull away. It is normal. I wanted to argue, to say it was more than just moodiness, but I stopped. I knew he meant well, but his words made me feel small, as if my intuition did not matter. He kissed me on the forehead and left with the dog, leaving me alone in the dim hallway. The next day, I picked her up from school. As we drove, I glanced in the rearview mirror and asked casually, still excited about the trip? There was a long pause before she answered. I guess. I tried again. You used to love going to the mountains. I do, she said. Then after a pause, she added, I do not like red cars. My hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. I kept my eyes on the road, forcing my voice to remain calm. Why not? She looked out the window and said nothing more. The rest of the drive passed in silence, but my mind was racing. I could hear the words again, as if whispered directly into my ear. Do not go on that trip. Ask your daughter about the man in the red car. It was just after sunset when I saw it again. I had stepped outside to water the plants on the porch, trying to shake the feeling that had been growing inside me for days. The sky was painted in fading streaks of orange and violet, the air still warm but thick with the stillness of early evening. I bent down to turn the spout of the hose, and when I looked up, there it was, parked across the street, half hidden behind a line of hedges. The red car. It was not the same one from before. I could tell by the shape, the model. But it was red. And it had been there when I came outside. No lights. No sound. Just sitting. Waiting. Watching. I stood frozen for a moment. My mind tried to reason with it. Maybe it belonged to someone visiting a neighbor. Maybe it was a coincidence. But that feeling returned, the one that had started with a message. The one that had only grown stronger each time I looked at my daughter and saw something she was not saying. I turned off the hose and went back inside. My daughter was sitting at the table, coloring absent-mindedly. Her book bag was by her feet. I sat down across from her and watched her for a moment. She did not look up. There is something I need to ask you, I said gently. She glanced at me, her eyes darting quickly away, then back to her paper. I need you to tell me the truth, I continued. I need you to tell me about the man in the red car. Her hands froze. The colored pencil stopped moving. She did not look up, but her entire body went still. A deep, sharp silence settled between us. I saw it again, I said, keeping my voice low. Outside. It is not the first time. I think he has been watching. And I think you know something. She was trembling now, barely visible at first, but her breath started to hitch. I stood and walked around the table, kneeling down beside her chair. You are safe, I whispered. I promise. But I need you to tell me what is going on. Please. She dropped the pencil. Her lip quivered. Then, without warning, she started to cry. Not just tears, but deep, racking sobs that came from somewhere buried. I held her hands, waited until she could speak. I did not want to tell you, she whispered between gasps. He told me not to. I felt something cold wrap around my spine. My hands gripped hers tighter. Who is he? I asked, keeping my voice steady. What did he say to you? She wiped at her face with her sleeve and looked at me with eyes full of fear. He started showing up a few weeks ago. At first, I thought it was just coincidence. A car like that parks near the school sometimes, you know? But then I noticed it was always there. Always in the same spot. After school. And then he started watching me. My breath caught. Did he talk to you? She nodded. One day, I was waiting by the school gate, and he pulled up right next to me. He rolled down the window and said my name. I do not know how he knew it. He said he was a friend of yours, that he knew our family. But he was lying. I could tell. My stomach twisted. What did he want? She swallowed hard. He asked me questions. If you worked late. If Dad was around. He said he liked talking to smart girls, and that I should not tell anyone about him. That it was our little secret. And then he said if I told you, something bad might happen. I tried to stay calm, but my voice shook. What kind of bad? She looked down at her hands. He said you might get hurt. That accidents happen all the time. And that if I was smart I would keep quiet. So I did. I was scared. I thought maybe he would go away if I ignored him. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. I had been walking around, trying to rationalize, trying to convince myself I was imagining things, while this man had been circling my daughter like a vulture. Watching, lying, threatening her. And she had been carrying that fear alone. Why did you not tell me? I asked, softer now. Her voice cracked. Because he said you would get hurt. And I could not lose you. I pulled her into my arms and held her as tightly as I could. Her small body shook against mine. I kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her hair, trying to push away the dread that had now taken full root in my chest. You did not do anything wrong, I whispered. None of this is your fault. I am so sorry. I should have seen it. I should have asked sooner. She clung to me, her tears soaking into my shirt. I held her for a long time, my mind racing. Every instinct in me screamed that we could not go on that trip. I would not take her anywhere near an unfamiliar road or cabin. I would not let her out of my sight. I had ignored the signs for too long already. Whoever he was, he had crossed a line. He had spoken to my child. He had threatened her, threatened me, and he was still out there. Somewhere nearby. But now I knew the truth, and I was going to do whatever it took to keep her safe. The morning after my daughter told me everything, I did not send her to school. I told her she would stay home with me for the day. I needed time to think, to act, to begin piecing together the threat that had slithered its way into our lives. As she slept late, exhausted from the night before, I sat in the kitchen with my laptop open and my hands trembling on the keyboard. My first step was the school. I called the principal and requested a meeting. I did not give too much detail on the phone, only said that I needed to discuss something urgent regarding my daughter's safety. They agreed to see me immediately. I drove there in silence, every passing red car tightening the knot in my stomach. The principal, a well-meaning woman named Ms. Carlyle, greeted me with concern. When I explained what my daughter had told me, how a strange man in a red car had been watching and speaking to her, her face turned pale. She led me to the security office and asked the technician to pull footage from the school's exterior cameras over the last 2 weeks. It took time. Too much time. But eventually, there it was. Frame after frame, the same red car parked just down the block from the school gates. Always the same position. Sometimes early, sometimes late. Never with a license plate visible. The driver remained a blur, hidden behind tinted windows or out of frame. But the car was there. Repeatedly. Watching. I asked Ms. Carlyle if any other parents had raised concerns. She hesitated, then admitted that 2 other mothers had mentioned something unusual. Their daughters had mentioned a car, a man, someone making them uncomfortable, but the details had been vague. Nothing had seemed serious enough to escalate. It was not vague anymore. It was a pattern. I filed a formal report with the local police. I sat in the station, hands folded tightly in my lap, and told the officer everything. The anonymous warning. The red car. The school footage. My daughter's confession. He listened, took notes, and promised they would increase patrols near the school. But without a clear face, a license plate, or a direct threat, there was little they could do immediately. I left feeling half heard, half dismissed, and fully terrified. When I returned home, my daughter was curled up on the couch with her favorite blanket. I kissed her head and told her everything would be all right. Then I retreated to my bedroom and shut the door. I started digging. I searched every social media site, every local forum, every news page I could find for similar stories. And slowly, pieces began to appear. Posts from concerned parents. Comments about a red car parked near playgrounds, schoolyards, and quiet residential streets. One user described her niece being approached by a man asking strange questions. Another said she had reported a man loitering near her daughter's school, but nothing had come of it. I printed out everything I found. I needed patterns. I needed connections. As I stared at the pages spread across my bed, something gnawed at the edges of my mind. A name. A face. Something long buried. I closed my eyes and let the years fall away. I was 16 again, walking home from school. A car had followed me once. A red car. I remembered the fear, the way my hands had shaken as I gripped my books tighter and quickened my pace. The car had crept along beside me for almost 3 blocks before it finally turned away. I told my mother, but she had brushed it off. Said maybe it was someone lost. It never happened again. But I never forgot it. And then another memory came. A boy. Older than me. Awkward. Intense. He had followed me around school for weeks. Left notes in my locker. Waited by my classes. I never spoke to him directly, but he gave me a strange feeling. One day, I found a small red toy car in my backpack. No note. No explanation. Just sitting there. I had thrown it away, creeped out but unsure of what to do. I never even learned his full name. Only a nickname. Danny. I started searching. It took hours, but I found an old yearbook photo online. I stared at his face, older than I remembered, but still familiar in the sharpness of his eyes. I searched the name attached. Daniel M. Cartwright. The search brought up very little. A few public records. An old address 2 towns over. Then one article from a local crime blotter. It was from over a decade ago. The charge was vague, disturbing the peace, suspicious behavior near a high school. No conviction. No follow-up. But my stomach told me it was him. He had been obsessed with me once. And now, all these years later, there was a man in a red car watching my daughter. A man who knew my name. A man who knew enough about me to find my family, my child. It could not be coincidence. I printed his photo and stared at it long into the night. If it was him, then this was not random. This was personal. Something had brought him back. Something had reignited whatever darkness had once led him to follow me, to leave that toy, to lurk in the shadows of my teenage years. And now, he was watching my daughter. Threatening her. Trying to draw us into something I did not yet understand. But I would find out. I would not rest until I knew everything. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of fear and determination. Every time I looked at my daughter, I saw a younger version of myself, vulnerable, unsure, and afraid of something no one else could see. It was like watching history repeat itself, only this time, I could not afford to stay quiet. I would not let her live in the shadow of fear the way I once had. The memory kept coming back, stronger each time. I was 16. It was early fall, and the afternoons were still warm, the sun dipping just enough to paint the sidewalks in long shadows. I used to walk home from school alone, along the same route every day, past the bakery, past the old bookstore, and through a stretch of quiet street lined with trees. That was where I saw it the first time. A red car parked a little too conveniently, a little too often. Sometimes it was off, empty. Other times, I could see a man inside, his face partially hidden by dark sunglasses, his hands still on the steering wheel. At first, I told myself it was a coincidence. People park cars. People wait in them. But the car kept appearing. It was never there in the morning, only in the afternoon, always parked where it had a clear view of the schoolyard. One afternoon, I caught a glimpse of him. Just a glimpse, but it was enough. He was older, maybe in his 20s at the time, with an angular face and a stare that clung to you like smoke. That night, I found a note in my backpack. No name, just a message: "You looked beautiful today." I remembered how my hands shook as I held it. I remembered the feeling of being watched, even when I was supposed to be safe inside my home. My mother dismissed it when I told her. She said it was probably a silly prank. I wanted to believe her. But the notes kept coming. They were never violent, never explicit, but they were personal, deeply, disturbingly personal. Then, one day, it all stopped. The red car disappeared. The notes ended. I never saw him again. Until now. It had to be him. Too much of it matched. The red car. The timing. The way he stayed just out of reach, watching. I felt the chill of it down to my bones. He had not forgotten me. And worse, he had found a new way to haunt me, through my daughter. I returned to the police station, holding the photo I had printed, the old yearbook face of Daniel M. Cartwright. I explained everything, even the parts that made me feel like I was slipping into paranoia. The officer, a younger man with tired eyes, listened with mild skepticism. He said they would look into it. They would compare the image with their records. But I could feel the hesitation behind his words. There was no hard proof. No clear threat. Just an old story and a mother afraid. When I left, I knew they would not act quickly enough. Not for me. Not for her. So I began watching. I changed my schedule. I started picking my daughter up from school myself, parking a block away where I could see the traffic, the side streets, the cars that came and went. I kept a notebook and jotted down every red car I saw. Make, model, time, place. I took photos when I could. I followed one car for nearly 6 blocks before I realized it was just an older woman on her way to work. The paranoia was setting in, but I welcomed it. It meant I was alert. It meant I would not miss the real thing when it appeared. One evening, just after sunset, I saw him. The car was parked just beyond the school zone, near a side street lined with trees. It was the same shade of red, deep, polished, almost too clean. And he was inside. Sunglasses gone now, but his face had aged the same way mine had. Still sharp. Still cold. I recognized him instantly. I froze for a moment, afraid he might notice me watching from across the street. But he just sat there, his eyes on the school exit. I raised my phone, snapped 3 photos, and drove away before he could follow me. Back home, I showed the photos to my daughter. She paled and nodded slowly. "That is him," she whispered. I filed another report. This time, I included the photos. I demanded a restraining order. I begged for surveillance. I told them everything, again. And again, they listened, but moved with the slow grind of procedure and paperwork. So I took more steps. I called the school and asked if they would let me speak at the next parent meeting. I told them there was a safety issue affecting more than one family. I stood in front of that room full of tired, busy parents and told them the truth. Some listened with alarm. Some with disbelief. But after I showed the photos, the murmurs grew louder. Other parents began nodding, whispering to one another. One mother came up to me afterward and said her daughter had also mentioned a man in a red car, but she had thought it was nothing. It was not nothing. We were being watched. I installed cameras outside my house. I changed our routines. I told my daughter to never walk alone, even to the mailbox. I felt like I was building a fortress with paper walls, but I had to do something. Every time I passed a red car, I felt my heart skip. Every time I saw headlights pause at the curb, I looked twice. It was like living with a shadow stitched to my skin. I did not know what he wanted, but I knew he was not finished. The morning of the trip arrived with a strange stillness in the air. My husband moved through the house with his usual calm demeanor, double-checking the luggage, making sure the cooler was packed, confirming the GPS route on his phone. He was determined to go, to cling to some sense of normalcy, to prove to himself that we were not living in fear. I watched him from the kitchen doorway, my arms crossed tightly over my chest. "I think we should cancel," I said quietly. He paused, looked up from his checklist. "You have been saying that all week. We cannot let fear run our lives." I shook my head. It is not fear. It is instinct. He sighed, the sound weary and impatient. He has not done anything since the last report. Maybe he is gone. Maybe he was never a real threat. You have been seeing shadows for weeks. Our daughter sat silently at the table, her cereal untouched. Her eyes flicked between us, wide and uncertain. She is afraid, I said. I am afraid. I will not go. He looked at me for a long moment, then turned away, muttering under his breath. I guess I will go without you then. My daughter stood abruptly. I want to stay too. He looked surprised. You were excited about the trip. I changed my mind, she said, her voice small but firm. He left without another word. As the sound of the car faded down the street, a heavy quiet fell over the house. My daughter and I spent the day close together, watching movies with the curtains drawn, avoiding the windows. I kept checking my phone, expecting a message, a call, some sign of trouble, or confirmation that everything was fine and I had overreacted. The sun began to set. The shadows outside grew long and deep. I turned on the porch light, pretending not to glance out the window every 5 minutes. Then I saw it. The red car. It was parked just down the street, behind a tree, half hidden. It had not been there all day. My heart dropped. I stared at it, frozen, willing it to disappear. But it did not move. It just sat there, like a predator waiting for the right moment. I reached for my phone and called the police. I gave the address, described the car again, explained that this was not a coincidence. The operator said someone would come by to check. I did not hang up. I stayed on the line, watching the car. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. The car door opened. A man stepped out. His shape was familiar. Too familiar. I felt my breath catch as he moved closer to the house, his movements casual but deliberate. I told the operator he was coming toward us. My daughter clung to my arm, her breath shaky. Then I heard it, the creak of the porch steps. I locked the door, turned off the lights, told my daughter to hide in the hallway closet and not come out until I told her. The door rattled. My heart pounded in my chest as I stepped back. Then a sudden bang. He was trying to force it open. I screamed into the phone that he was breaking in. The dispatcher told me officers were on the way. Another bang. I grabbed the fire poker from beside the fireplace, the only weapon I had. Then the door burst open. He stepped inside, tall, calm, his face clearer now in the dim light. And I recognized him. Not just from the photos. Not just from memory. From life. He had been at our neighborhood barbecue 2 summers ago. A friend of a neighbor. A guest at our own backyard table. He had even complimented my daughter's art, asked polite questions, laughed with the others. His name was Mark. Not Daniel. Not a stranger from the past. But now I saw it. The same eyes. The same shape of his jaw. Older. Altered. But him. He looked at me, surprised by the fire poker raised in my hands, but still calm. You should not have stopped the trip, he said softly. It was going to be better this way. What do you want? I asked, my voice trembling. I just wanted to see her. Just talk. I would not have hurt her. Not like they said. He stepped forward, and I swung. Not to hurt him, just to make him stop. The poker connected with his arm, and he stumbled. Then, sirens. He looked toward the window. Panic flickered across his face. You do not understand, he said, backing toward the door. It was never supposed to be like this. I stood between him and the hallway. You stay away from her. He ran. Out the door, into the night. The sirens grew louder, lights flashing against the dark trees. I ran to the doorway and pointed toward the street, yelling to the officers as they arrived. They chased him. I did not see the end of it, but they found him a few blocks away, hiding in someone's backyard. Later, they confirmed everything. His name was Mark Daniels. He had legally changed it years ago. He had served time for stalking in another state. He had moved here under a new name. No one had known, or maybe no one had cared. But I had remembered. And this time, I had stopped him. The trip never happened. But something far more important did. I saved her. The days that followed felt like stepping through broken glass. Every moment was delicate, sharp, and painfully vivid. The man, Mark Daniels, was arrested and taken into custody. After his failed attempt to break into our home, the evidence finally became undeniable. The officers recovered his fingerprints from the doorknob, the porch railing, and even the empty teacup he had left on a neighbor's patio weeks earlier. He had been watching us. Not just parked outside, but moving through the neighborhood like a ghost in daylight. When they searched his car, they found a notebook. Inside were pages filled with details about my daughter, her school schedule, our family routines, places we had visited. His fixation had grown over time, festering quietly until it could no longer be hidden. The officers showed me some of the pages, but I could not read more than a few lines. My hands shook too badly. I kept seeing her face. I kept thinking about what could have happened if I had not listened to that strange warning. He had no immediate family. No employment history for the past year. He had been living out of the vehicle for weeks, maybe longer, using different parking lots, sleeping on quiet streets. He was smart, calculated, and quiet. That was what made him so dangerous. Once the authorities took the case seriously, the fear did not disappear. It shifted. It became a quiet undercurrent in our home, in our conversations, in the way I looked at every unfamiliar face. The questions they asked me, how long had I known him, how had I recognized him so quickly, what were the details of my past interactions with him, forced me to revisit the memories I had buried. Memories from when I was barely older than my daughter is now. A man in a red car who used to wait for me outside my high school. Who used to follow me to work. Who once left a letter on my windshield that said he could see into my soul. He was never arrested then. He vanished before anything could be proven. And I moved away, changed my life, tried to forget. But he had not forgotten me. That night, after the police left and the house returned to silence, I sat on my daughter's bed and watched her sleep. Her breathing was slow and even. She clutched her stuffed rabbit the same way she had when she was a toddler. The innocence on her face broke me. I leaned over and kissed her forehead, and I whispered how sorry I was for everything, what I had missed, what I had not asked, what I had been too afraid to see. The next morning, I made pancakes even though I had barely slept. She came into the kitchen quietly, her hair tangled from sleep, her eyes a little less heavy. She sat down and picked at her food for a moment before speaking.
Is he gone?
Yes, I said.
He is gone.
Will he come back?
No.
I will not let him. She nodded and kept eating. I could see the weight beginning to lift. It would take time, but she had begun to believe me. To believe that she was safe. In the days that followed, I reached out to a counselor. For her. For me. We both needed someone to help us carry the pieces of this and slowly put them back together. Healing was not a single event, it was a process. And we were taking the first step. My husband returned home, quieter than usual, more present. We did not talk much about the trip or the argument. The silence between us was filled with mutual guilt and fear. But there was also something else, understanding. He had seen what I had been trying to say all along. He had seen the man. He had seen the truth. I became more careful. I paid attention in ways I never had before. I checked locks twice. I watched cars that passed too slowly. I taught my daughter how to stay aware, how to speak up, how to trust her instincts. I never wanted her to feel powerless again. Sometimes at night, I still hear the creak of the porch steps in my mind. I still see the red car when I close my eyes. I wonder how long he had been watching us. I wonder why he waited so long to act. And I wonder what would have happened if I had ignored the warning completely. That message still haunts me. I never found out who sent it. It had come in the mail, on a plain piece of paper, typed and unsigned. No return address. No fingerprints. Just one line. Do not go on that trip. Ask your daughter about the man in the red car. Whoever sent it, whether it was a neighbor, a stranger, or even someone who had once known him, I owed them everything. That message had saved us. Sometimes I look out the window and stare at the place where the red car once sat. The street is quiet now. The wind rustles the leaves. Life moves forward. But I remember. I remember how close we came. How narrow the line was between safety and disaster. And I remember the thought that still chills me to the bone. If I had gone on that trip, I might never have heard the truth.